Hello world and welcome to Bipey Fox. Today we have Ian Timmings and he has bipolar 2. That's all we're going to say for today. How you doing, Ian?
I'm good. I'm neither manic nor depressed, so life at the moment is very good. Obviously with COVID and everything, everyone's had a really rubbish year and a half. I've had an exceptionally bad time. My mum died on Christmas Day last year of COVID. So there's been lots of things that could have potentially added to my stress levels and made me manic, but they haven't. I was concerned initially after hearing about mum that I was starting to feel a bit manic, and I'm normally very good at keeping tabs on these things, recognising the signs. I was wrong. I'm usually not, but I was wrong on that occasion. So at the moment I'm very busy, very sociable. I've got lots of interests, so I've been doing lots on that front, and just enjoying my time and able to do sometimes the smallest things, which are a real struggle when I'm depressed.
Oh, I can imagine. So that's amazing. I mean, as I said, we've introduced you as not we, as in me, but you've been introduced as having bipolar 2. I have bipolar 1.
Yeah.
You were saying that the stress might have brought out mania. Is that something that you want to delve into?
Yeah, sure. It's a big factor, and it's something that I need to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
I quite often have manic episodes that are triggered by particularly stressful situations, so it's something that I have to be mindful of and make sure that my risk-taking nature isn't taking the kind of risks that are likely to come with big consequences that are going to be detrimental to me. Okay,
amazing. So do you find that stress actually induces mania?
Not each and every time. Like I said, with mum, I'm dealing with that pretty well, really, in the scheme of things. Sometimes it will not necessarily be a specific thing. It will be a very gradual process. Each of my moods, aspects of my mood cycle, are very gradual. It's very, very rare that anything happens overnight, which is often a misnomer when people hear the term bipolar disorder.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it manifests in people differently. I personally, with bipolar 1 and my bipolar 1, manic episodes and depression. I worked this out actually quite recently because I thought that my manic switch was almost literally like instantaneous, but actually it gives me 4 days for both. So I have about approximately 4 days, right? 4 days for depression, 4 days for mania. So the way I see depression is when something switches in my head and I'm going to go into a depression. Predominantly I'll get quite anxious, right? Actually, to the point where I spoke to a doctor about that, or my psychiatrist about that, and he said, you're not depressed, you're just anxious. So I took some anti-anxieties at the time when I was taking medication, and that soothed that. But then again, I had the 4-day thing where I knew that I was getting depressed. I could still talk to people, I could still communicate and live a fairly functional life. But by the time that 4 days was up, that was it for me. I was rock bottom. That was depression, and the same way that worked for mania as well. I had 4 days. So I'll have a feeling of mania. So anything from... I mean, the last time I sat in a private hospital, the Priory, and I literally walked through the front door, sat down, and something changed in my head. And then 4 days later, I literally felt a surge of energy in my body that went into my brain, and there was like a little mini explosion in my head, right? And then I was manic. I was hypermanic. So I was...
This is why people with bipolar often have religious notions, because feelings like that are very easy to interpret as being God, or for want of a better term, something spiritual. I mean, I am an atheist, But there have been instances where it's felt like I was touched by God, so I could very easily see how that could be interpreted that way.
Do you want to explore that?
I have to a degree. I mean, I'm very interested in the spiritual side of psychology, which is something that Carl Jung was looking into. Mm-hmm. I think people often herald Freud as being the father of modern day psychoanalysis, and they're almost dismissive of Jung, and they think that he was a contemporary. I don't see it in such black and white terms. I think there were weird things going on. Synchronistic bits and pieces happen much more when I'm manic. Now, you could argue that because my mindset is more conducive to recognising these things, it's actually my head and not the world. But when other people are watching what's going on around me and the coincidences and picking up on them, it's not so easy. Now, I used to try and think I was kind of in touch with something that was kind of beyond conventional comprehension. Now, I'm not sure, but I read these things as kind of a nice thing. So the way the thing I jokingly say is, it's a sign from the universe. Not sure what the sign is, but it's a sign.
Do you know what?
I don't delve too deeply into it.
My B is going to listen to this, and she's going to be very happy because, for what it's worth, like, I don't want to delve too deep into religion. I think if I'm going to do that with anything I do, again, like in literally the last podcast just now, I've said I'm not pretending to be a doctor, and I don't have the experience of a doctor, and so if I speak any science, it's going to have to be in the presence of a doctor. And same with religion, because I take them in equally as high regard. But it's interesting you say that, because I have signs and everything, and I don't tell everyone, so. You know, I kind of drip feed it into these podcasts every now and then. But for example, like my grandma comes to me it's actually a winged creature, but more specifically, it's a white butterfly. And at the moment, she's everywhere, Ian. She's literally everywhere. And
sorry to interrupt.
No,
did you see the Stephen Fry documentary, Private Life of the Manic Depressive?
I did.
Right.
I did.
One of the people he spoke to, and this was a very logical, rational, calm guy. I think it's the guy that used to be a naval officer, but don't quote me on that. But basically, one of the people he spoke to said something about he will occasionally meet people and know that they're angels.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds ridiculous, but I know what he means.
Oh, 100%.
I was always attracted to people with bipolar disorder, even before I was diagnosed. I mean, obviously, like-minded people often attract like-minded people. But it's like, the analogy I use is, I've never been pregnant, and I will never be pregnant. I can begin to try and understand what it's like to be pregnant. I can try and relate aspects of it to things that I have experienced, but I'll never really 100% completely know. And it's the same with bipolar, and would imagine other, for want of a better term, disorders, people who aren't neurotypical.
Oh, 100%. I think, like, my thing is, I don't know, I've met a lot of people in my life, that's through, the start of life was social parents, that it then became school because I just love people, and then it became university, and then it became the job that I did was in sales, so that was people orientated, and then I went into TV, and that's extremely people orientated, and then it's just generally like every man, woman and dog, if I'm perfectly honest. So I love people, but I think, like, I don't know all the people I've met, whether they have bipolar or not, but the one thing that I can definitely relate to, and I think, for want of a better word, is a gift. I think I have the ability to level with people that are suffering. I think that's the only way of dealing with it, and I mean that's the only way of describing it, because for example I saw a woman who's a very close family friend the other day, and she's not very well at all. Now, that she's not suffering from a mental disorder, she's just suffering, and she's suffering silently. I don't want to go too much into it because it's not my place, but
Sure.
I just feel I have an affinity with people like that, and I think a lot of people, I think a lot of the bipolar people that I've met do, and the one thing that runs true with all of them so far is a caring nature, and I think, I don't know, I think there's something inherent in this disorder, or whatever you want to call it, that gives you that caring side of things. Because even as you said, you talk about Stephen Fry. Look, I don't know him. You know, I've got a lot of time for him, and one day, hopefully, he'll come on the podcast. Obviously, we're working in conjunction with Bipolar UK anyway, so he's a friend of Bipolar UK, but he is a very famous, talented man in his own right, and he doesn't have to spread the word of bipolar, and I think that's quite a caring thing to do.
My mission statement is to be more Stephen Fry, less Kurt Cobain. Not because I don't like Kurt Cobain, I did. But he lost his battle. Yeah. Whereas Stephen Fry's managed to the point where he's become very successful and rich and recognised and respected.
Oh, 100%. And Kurt Cobain, like, I love that, because I think I don't want to give Stephen Fry too much airtime, Ian, just because, you know, he hasn't agreed to come on the podcast yet. So, you know, maybe...
Well, he's got a very big platform.
Exactly. Maybe if he listens to this, he might, you know, get in contact. I can... I'll send you... Check it out on Instagram, Stephen, if you're listening. But anyway...
if you've not heard of him, it's Stephen Fry.
Yeah, exactly. Look him up. He's pretty famous. But no, Kurt Cobain's an interesting one, because he always comes up as one of the celebrities that actually has bipolar, and I don't think any of us. I think we can safely. I don't know about you, Ian, but I think I can safely say that he probably was bipolar. But at the same time, like, we just don't know that, because he wasn't diagnosed. And I've done a lot of research into Kurt Cobain, and he had a lot of problems with his gut. Right? Do you know about that?
Yeah, I'm vaguely aware of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because some of the first symptoms I ever had when I was around... Well, the first panic attack I ever had was when I was about 4 or 5. But the first proper symptoms, I remember saying to my parents, I was like, look, I can't sleep because my stomach hurts. Now, I had nothing wrong with my stomach, but that, to me, was anxiety. That's the way I look back at it anyway. Now, Kurt was never Kurt. Like, he's my mate. It would have been nice. But Kurt Cobain, you know, never got diagnosed as bipolar, but all of his symptoms and the way that he sort of portrayed himself through his art and through the media and through his life, I guess, showed signs of bipolarity in that sense.
Yeah, a lot of the boxes. I mean, I'm more clued up about Stephen, having read his autobiography, Moby's Your Washpot, other than being an alright Nirvana fan. I was never a massive fan. Yeah. But one of the things that I do to try and make a point is I have a list in my head of famous and recognisable names with bipolar disorder. I didn't actually know that Kurt hadn't been officially diagnosed, because sometimes these people are posthumously diagnosed. I know psychologists have looked at Mozart in terms of things like his output alone, because he will, you know, be sonnet after music thing, and then nothing for a few years, and then back up to ridiculous amounts working day and night. So they have applied the diagnosis after his death, but obviously that's trickier than being able to have a one-to-one and have an official consultation with a medical practitioner who's qualified.
I think, Ian, that's the point. Like, I don't want to say you're obviously extremely intelligent. I don't want to say an obvious point like, oh, they just didn't know about it back in the day, because we all know that. But that's what I think is important to remember, is that actually, like, bipolar's been around since Van Gogh, like, and he's one of the most famous, obviously, but like, that was manic depression, and obviously that even just that language has changed now. And they even knew at the time that he was manically depressed. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that was pretty obvious.
I went to an exhibition last year. There was a light show in a church, and there was a lot of information about Van Gogh. The more I read, the more I was convinced.
Oh, completely.
He was bipolar.
Yeah, just get me straight. He was the one who cut off his ear, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've not